Hello, good evening, and welcome to Michael Coren Live on CTS. And shock horror, no, you're not having a hallucination. Yeah, it is us, live, at 10 o'clock. We warned you, and it's happened. The show is now from 10 till 11:30, a 90-minute show. There's really nothing like this on television. Most shows, half an hour, an hour. It was going very well. You seem to like what we do. You call in large numbers, in fact, too large for us to cope. We only get to a small percentage of you, so we've extended to an hour and a half. To reiterate, from 10 till 11:30. Now, if you tune in at 10:30, that's fair enough, but try and be there for 10 for the whole show. What it'll mean is when we discuss subjects that are particularly passionate and poignant and important, the full hour and a half on them. When the subjects are important, but maybe not quite as acute, an hour for one subject, half an hour for another. Some of the lighter issues I'd like to talk about, arts and so on, theatre, literature, people in town who are worth an interview. I don't want to give an hour interview to an American star. Hey, Harrison Ford, you're not worth an hour, I might say, but I'll give you half an hour. So that's the sort of thing we'll be doing. The show will remain pretty much as it is, I hope, as successful and effective as it is, and honest as it's always been, but more time. And a few more little bits of excitement you will see as we go along. Lines are open for you right now, as they always are. 416-203-0302 and 905-332-3131. I hate you. Ever heard that? Sure, you've had an argument with someone. I hate you. Empty words, they don't matter. You may have said it to someone. Not a big deal. But what about when the person saying it maybe has a club or an iron bar, a gun, a knife? What about when they're saying it because you've had an argument? That isn't the issue. It's because you happen to be black or gay or Jewish or a woman or someone who just doesn't fit in. A hate crime. A crime, violence, motivated not by greed or lust, but by hatred. Now, is there such a thing as a hate crime? Is a crime ever based on love? No, but it might be based on indifference or simple greed. But a hate crime, a hate crime. They've always been there, but it's relatively recently we've actually given them a name. Should they be punished by extra penalties under law, or should we treat them just like any other crime? What actually are they? Once again, the lines are open for you, 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. On my left tonight is Paul McKeever, a lawyer and a member of the Ontario Freedom Party. Welcome back to you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Looking good. I like the haircut.
Thank you.
Makes you look even more right-wing. No, just teasing. On my close left is David Mercury, who's a criminal lawyer, former police officer, and a member of a minority, too. Which one we won't reveal, but...
Secret safe of you, eh?
Exactly, exactly. On my right is Marvin Kurz, who's the National Legal Counsel for Brith Canada. Welcome to you, sir.
Welcome.
And on my far right, Bernie Farber, Executive Director, Canadian Jewish Congress. Welcome to you.
Thank you, Michael.
Bernie, let's begin with you. What actually is a hate crime?
Well, a hate crime is basically any crime that is motivated by hatred, and it can take all kinds of forms, from a simple assault that has been motivated because of the color of a person's skin or a person's racial or religious background, to a charge under Canada's hate laws. So it really, it runs the gamut. It's something that we try to bring into a certain amount of control here in Canada. We have been semi-successful in doing that, but I don't think we've reached any peak, that's for sure. We find much more of these kinds of crimes, certainly the violent kinds of crimes happening in the United States. And of course, this past summer, we were witness to one of the most, well, certainly a terribly tragic incident in Los Angeles, where a stark raving madman, as far as I'm concerned, a member of a far-right extremist group, walked into a Jewish community center day camp and opened fire. And that the picture, and I'm sure many of your viewers will remember it, of the line of children being, led across the street by armed police officers, is an image that will haunt me for a long time. I have children, you have children, and the very thought that a person can walk in with that kind of firepower and randomly shoot children for one reason, and I think a lot of the show will be about that. Mm-hmm. The only reason, and he said so, that he walked into that building was because there were Jews in that building.
Well, you get to the point very readily, and I appreciate it. It was a grotesque crime. How was it different, though, from a madman going into an ordinary school because he was mad and shooting children of whatever race?
There are terrible tragedies that happen in life. And that's something that, as human beings, we live with. But when a person makes a decision to commit a violent act for one reason only, and that is because that person hates the other person, because the person loathes the other person. There's no other reason. He may not have chosen anything else, but he chose the LA Jewish Community Center day camp for one reason alone, and that was because that person was, the building was filled with Jews, and he's made that very clear. And that, from I think my point of view, makes it a different sort of a crime. There are crimes that happen every day. There are assaults that go on, mostly motivated by greed and avarice. And, you know, living in a dangerous world, we have to put up with that. But we don't have to put up with crimes that are motivated simply because of the color of a person's skin or a person's religious background. That adds a flavor to the crime that is untenable. It adds a sense to the crime that I think it turns my stomach. And if we are attempting to create a society where David or myself feel free and comfortable walking down the street without having to worry about our religious background or the color of our skin, we have to, I think, find ways to protect groups within society. And hate crime, I think, is the kind of a situation that just makes a society an evil society.
Mm-hmm. Marvin Kurz, a man is walking along and he looks fairly wealthy and he's beaten for his money. He's beaten up and his wallet is taken. A man is walking along and he's wearing a skull cap. He looks Jewish and he's beaten up. The wounds are the same to both men. It's a terrible crime. But the man who beats up the Jewish person gets a harsher sentence because it was a hate crime. Explain the logic behind that.
Well, the logic is very clear. You attack a man because he's rich, because of your avarice, because you want to steal his money, you're attacking that person only. You attack somebody because they're Jewish, because they're black, because they're gay. You're not just attacking that person. You're attacking a whole community, and not just that community, the Jewish community, the black community, the gay community. You're attacking the entire community. Our democratic society is based on egalitarianism, equality of all people, and the right of all people to exercise their rights. If I'm afraid to walk down the street because I'm black, or Jewish, or gay, or Asian, then my democratic rights have been stolen from me. And if somebody robs me of that democratic right because of my fear, then he's attacked me, he's attacked the particular group I'm a member of, and he's really attacked all of our society because he's attacked our democracy. So what has to be looked at is that hate crimes are hatred of everybody's rights, everybody's democratic rights. And we all have those rights. Mm-hmm. We all have the right to have no fear in society, to be able to exercise our rights equally, and not to be put down because of it, not to be threatened because of it, not to have really somebody steal those rights from it. So that's the difference between the individual, between getting beaten up, I'll change the example a bit, getting beaten up in a barroom brawl, physically attacked, as two Jewish men were recently on their way to synagogue on a Friday night as they were going to exercise their religious rights and to worship. Because the guy that did that attacked all Jews, first of all. Obviously, it was just the fact that these two people were attacked was an excuse. They're attacking all Jews, and they were saying to all Jews, you don't have the right to be here, and we're going to threaten all of you, just like Mr. Furrow did when he basically said, I'm trying to awaken the world. And he's saying to Canadian society, we want there to be second-class citizens, people that we don't like, and we're going to try to steal those people's rights.
Okay, I see where you're coming from, but so are we making certain crimes political? I mean, what I'm saying is this: when a man rapes a woman, he may rape a woman simply because he is lascivious, but he also may be a misogynist. He may hate women. How do we define what is hate and what is not? Do those with political power define what is hatred, what is political? Aren't we getting into a rather dangerous area there?
Well, we have to make politically decisions every day. And what is a political decision? A political decision is a decision that is made by political leaders in the exercise of their democratic rights and the powers that have been given to them by our elections to balance different rights. Every decision really is political. A great political theorist said many years ago, you're either hammer or anvil. You're either the guy doing the hitting or you're the guy being hit. All of those are political. Every decision that's made every day has some aspect of politics. And for us to decide that something is legal and something is illegal is a political decision. The decision that, for example, that our libel laws will protect people's reputations as opposed to simply unfettered freedom of expression is a political decision. The decision that people cannot steal from each other is a political decision. Every decision is political.
Well, I think we can argue about the definition of political, and we can quote Aristotle to Nietzsche, but we're getting off topic slightly. Let me ask you this, I think a very topical point. Can a member of a minority commit a hate crime?
Sure.
They can?
Why shouldn't they be able to commit a hate crime?
Well, I asked it as a rhetorical question, but I wonder what your answer would be.
Well,
So
if I want to attack a black guy because he's black, just because I'm Jewish doesn't exempt me.
What about if a Jewish person wants to attack a Gentile because he's a Gentile, or a black person wants to attack a white person, or a gay person wants to attack a straight person?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, a very famous American case, the first American case dealing with their sentencing enhancement laws, dealt with a group of black thugs who attacked a white because they had just seen a movie called Burning Mississippi that showed discrimination by whites against black. Mississippi Burning.
Yeah, quite a good movie. All right. Lines are open, 416-203-0302. Maybe you should burn Mississippi, but that's beside the point. 905-332-3131. Lines are open, getting busy already. Back in a couple of moments on Michael Coren Live. Don't go away, the 90-minute edition. Welcome back to Michael Coren Live, and yes, we now begin at 10 o'clock, 10 to 11:30. Might take a bit of time to get used to it, but this is a new 90-minute show, and just to remind you, often, as with tonight, a major subject demands an hour and a half. And other times, it'll be a 1-hour subject, half an hour, maybe 2 or 45 minutes. We'll go with the flow. And as I've always said, we are a channel, a conduit for you. What do you want? You tell us, and we will act on that. Lines are open for you. 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. What is a hate crime? Have you been a victim of a hate crime? Have you committed a hate crime? Give a false name if you want to talk about that. We'll listen to you. And should a so-called hate crime be treated differently from another crime? Is any crime a crime of love? I want to hear views on this. Get to the other half of my panel. David Mercury, former police officer, lawyer. As a policeman, were you ever involved in dealing with hate crimes?
No, I wasn't. My duties were mostly in other areas, so I didn't have the opportunity to, or the occasion to have to deal with hate crimes.
Mm-hmm. How do you think, and you're always a candid man, you know the police well, you were there for, was it 12 years?
No, just over 10.
Just over 10 years. How would the police generally deal with a crime if it was thought to be a hate crime? Would they deal with it differently, or are they just doing their job and solving crimes, whatever the motivation?
Well, I think that, police speaking, I feel that the police would attempt to deal with a hate crime appropriately, but the difficulty comes in recognition. Very often when someone is a victim of a hate crime, they know it's a hate crime. Mm-hmm. They know there's hate involved. But when you tell someone else, you know, they're going to say, oh, well, I think you're being a little too sensitive. I think you're imagining things. You know, so there's that lack of recognition. Also, I think when you're not the victim of a hate crime, you're not always cognizant of the full impact of that crime against you. Mm. You know, it can be analogous to a form of terrorism when you're the victim of a hate crime, when you know people who are hated, people who are like you, people who you can identify with, who are hated, or who have, even if it's just things being said to them, even if they're not assaulted, but just the constant barrage of things being said to you, or the constant barrage of differential treatment, you know, you start to become so aware that it affects every time you stores, every time you turn on the television, every exposure you have to the rest of society, it affects that. And in that way, it becomes a form of terrorism, in that you can't live your life in the manner that one would normally live their life.
Mm-hmm. We have entire structures of laws, and I support them entirely. Certain things can't be said. We have a form of censorship, and generally we don't wake up in the morning and say, oh dear, I can't go out and express racial hatred. It works. You know, it keeps people in a certain order, and I actually agree with that. But A woman, for example, my wife won't go running at night, won't go running because she's nervous. Does she fear hatred? No, she fears, as a fairly young woman, that something would happen to her. You might live in a certain area, high crime rate, you'd be frightened to walk at night. Now, this is intimidation. You could say it's a form of terrorism, but that is not defined as hatred. This is what I'm worried about, where we define hatred and where we don't, and who decides. We've been told it's all political. Your comments on that?
Well, the thing is that, you know, take the example of your wife, she's afraid to go out because she's afraid of being assaulted. And then that's a reality of our society, probably a reality of the world. But it's different, I suspect, in that because she's a woman, she falls as an easier victim. But it's different from where somebody is deliberately targeted because of their religious belief, because of the color of their skin, because of their sexual preference. You know, so I think it's a different thing where people are sought out or people are targeted because of these things versus where somebody sees easy prey and takes advantage of an opportunity. So I think that's one strong differentiation.
Right.
And that's not to minimize,
No, of course not.
you know, women having to be afraid to go out. You know, I think we all have women in our lives who are important to us, mothers, sisters, daughters, you know, what have you. But I think it's apples and oranges to try and compare the two.
Okay. Paul McKeever, lawyer and member of the Ontario Freedom Party. This all sounds very reasonable.
Some would think so. I just find it very interesting that we're couching the difference between, I think we were talking about the crimes of greed and motivated by greed and avarice. We were positioning those against the crimes motivated by hate. And the underlying rationale was, well, we have to protect democracy. But surely democracy depends on freedom of thought, freedom to believe what you will and to express that very belief. That's the essence of democracy, being able to express your will to the government, having the government make use of that expressed will. And if you look at the way Canadian laws are written, I'm not talking about the way they've been applied in the very few cases where they have been applied, but if you look at the way the law is written, the law punishes hate motivated by crime.
Crime motivated by hate.
Crime motivated by hate, independently of whether the impact of that crime has been relatively large to the person, to the actual victim. So, for example, a happy face, to take a case that Bernie once was on, I think it was Leila's, where there was vandalism to a synagogue, and there were all sorts of neo-Nazi garbage written on the wall. If instead a happy face had been written on that same wall, but had been motivated by, the person had done it out of a hatred for the Jewish community or for a particular person in particular, the way our laws are written, the person still would be subject to a greater sentence. Not because of the impact necessarily on the community, but because it was motivated by hate.
Well,
so what
I think you've got that just a little bit wrong, and I'll tell you why. In order for a crime to be motivated by hatred, there's got to be some proof that hatred was actually involved. So if you have a person drawing a happy face on the wall of a synagogue, it's going to be pretty hard to say, well, this was necessarily motivated by hatred.
Right.
When a person draws a swastika on the wall of a synagogue, it's significantly different.
Let me
So
give you another example.
that person would have been charged with, you know, writing graffiti on a wall.
What about if the man who writes the happy face says, I'm a Nazi, I hate Jews, and I wrote this, and I might have written more if I had the chance?
Exactly. But part of the thing is the effect. What was troubling and what was particularly damaging about Leila's is the fact that a swastika was written, not a happy face.
Right.
And that's what made it hate motivated.
Well, let's take it for example.
So if I don't, for example, if I want to steal from you and I don't,
Right.
if I want to steal from you and I pat you on your back,
Right.
then maybe I'm motivated by something wrong,
All right, hold
but
on.
I have to do something
You're stealing
bad.
his time at the moment, so just finish this comment.
Let's take it the other. Let's use the exact same symbols and whatnot. Put it on a building that has nothing to do with the Jewish community, maybe a fire station or a church of some other denomination where maybe people don't really care. Still, that person, not having necessarily targeted a Jewish community's building, would still be found to have been required to be subject to, rather, a stiffer penalty because the crime was motivated by hate.
Not necessarily. It depends on what was written on the wall. And we're bringing it down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
If the person were to write on the wall of the fire station,
yes,
Jews die,
right,
okay, and we've seen that. We have seen that.
right.
That is motivated by hatred. If the person prints a swastika on there, you know, there's nothing against the law. Some may feel that there should be, but there's nothing against law printing a swastika on a wall, other than if it's on a, you know, a private residence or something. The person will be charged with whatever, but nothing to do with hate motivation.
Right,
so we have to be very specific.
Let me stop you there. Lots of calls coming in. We'll get to you all, Tracy, Richard, Tom, Frida, Brown, the rest of you. More discussion, more time now. 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. Michael Coren live, CTS. Yes, it's 10:22. We've already started. Back in a moment. Don't you dare go away, all right? Welcome back to Michael Coren Live on CTS. And by the way, you're probably noticing the new launch of the station, some of the new shows and so on. And, you know, a year ago people said, oh, it won't last. They're not saying that now, are they? They're saying, hey, what's on tonight? Interesting how the good guys sometimes do win. Lines are open. They're pretty busy at the moment. We'll get to them. Let me reintroduce my panel. On my left is Paul McKeever, a lawyer and a member of the Ontario Freedom Party. David Mercury is a criminal lawyer and a police officer for more than 10 years. On my right is Marvin Kurz, National Legal Counsel for Brith Canada, and Bernie Farber, Executive Director of the Canadian Jewish Congress, one of the few men who has also won an earring on this show.
And I've noticed yours is back in, actually.
It is back in.
Yeah,
That sort of radical frame of mind, Bernie. Well, let's go to the lines. Tracy is on line 7. Hi there, Tracy.
Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Good evening. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Good. First, I wanted to give you my definition of a hate and love crime. I think it's a senseless act of violence. I'm a mother, as you know, I've been on your show. I'm Christy's mother.
Oh, right, yes.
Right, who was murdered at 16 through an act of, first of all, you know, he was in love with her, and then it turned to hate because he couldn't have her and murdered her. And my comment was that our laws have to be changed and they have to be tougher. Hate and love crimes lead to murder.
This is a very interesting point. This is a terrible case of a young woman who was murdered when a boyfriend was no longer wanted. The love did turn to hatred. Can we call that a hate crime, though?
Well, I don't know that we can call it a love crime. You know, I don't think it's love. I think it's possession. I don't think that's not love.
But that wouldn't be a hate crime, would it?
Obviously, it's an individual hatred. It was a terrible tragedy of two young people, one turning against the other because he ended up hating her individually, not because of the color of her skin, but because of what happened within this very tragic relationship. Yes. If we take a look at Marvin's definition, which I think was a good one, and that was that a hate crime has to be seen really as an attack against an entire community, this particular crime, as tragic as it was, and not in any way to minimize the tragedy to the family, of course, would not fall within that realm. It has nothing to do with a tougher sentence approach either. Exactly. You know, we certainly may agree on that issue.
Tracy, how are you doing?
Fine.
Doing better?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Good stuff. Thank you for the call. I really do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Very brave person. Let's go to Richard on line 1. Hi there, Richard.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, great. Yeah, I was just turned on to your show. It's great. I don't watch it often. But anyway, the definition, I guess, of hate and love crime, I don't know what love crime is, but the hate crime, I think it's...
You know, Richard, sorry to interrupt. Love, that's a bit of a digression. We're not talking about that. The point I made was any crime motivated by love, but hate crime is the real issue tonight.
Yeah, okay. I think the whole thing is caused by a lack of education, ignorance, and people feeling sorry for themselves, and they have a bad day. I don't know. I don't understand. Maybe because I'm a victim of hate crime in a way. Mm-hmm. But I live it because I'm kind of a philosopher, I'm an artist and all that.
Well, tell me how you're a victim of a hate crime.
Well, I'm different, and that's what it is. Everyone's different, which makes the world change.
In what way are you different, Richard?
I'm creative, I'm an inventor, and I ride a special kind of bike, which is a recumbent. And I used to drive a car and bikes, and I say, I want to try a recumbent. I don't know if you know what a recumbent bike is.
Yeah, I've seen them around. It may have been you I've seen around, actually. I hate them. No, I'm joking. But
you're not going to commit a crime again.
But Richard, have you been attacked because of that?
A little bit, but I can defend myself. I use philosophy. I know myself as I can hate people, but then I recognize why. Cause it, 3 factors. And once you know, you control yourself. So I put my energy into something else by control.
Richard, I mean, with respect, I mean, you might use philosophy, that's fair enough, you know, hit them with a copy of Plato's Republic or something, but if someone is attacked because they're Jewish or because they're black, that's something different, isn't it? I mean, are you not, with all due respect, minimizing the issue here and how difficult it can be for people?
Could you repeat that? I missed that.
Actually, it's all right, Richard. I'll send you a copy of the tape. But thank you for the call. Let's go to Tom on line 5. Hi there, Tom.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm well, thank you very much.
You're reaching tonight, I think.
Reaching?
Yes, I think so.
In what way?
Well, you've got the Jewish gentleman there and the lawyer, and you've got the black gentleman. And you know what I think? I think that if you're talking about hate crimes, you're talking about, what about, you know what, I'm a Catholic, so I don't, you know, agree with any of these things. Not that I agree, but I don't coincide with it. But you know what, I think that both of these gentlemen, especially the black gentleman, has a reason to be pissed off because you are pushing the Jewish aspect. These guys are rich, okay? There's one guy there, he's a lawyer. The other guy, he's a, you know what? He's his face is down. What?
I think there's an international Jewish conspiracy of bankers.
That was my question. Tom, the so-called black gentleman, I know him, he's not that much of a gentleman, actually, but he's also a lawyer. So
he's probably richer than I am.
Why, Tom, this is quite an interesting call here. Why are you referring to the wealth of 2 Jewish guys on my right? I mean, I don't know that I know one of them fairly well, the other one not very well. I don't think, I'm probably wealthier than they are, but why are you talking about this implied wealth?
Okay, good question. Here's the answer.
Give me a good answer.
If you see a black guy driving a BMW, don't you think he's a drug dealer?
No, because I'm not a racist. Do you, Tom?
No.
Well, then why would you ask such a question?
What about your listeners? What do you think they think?
They're viewers, actually, Tom. But let's talk about you, Tom. What is the point you're making here? Why have you called?
Well, the point that I called is that I think that the whole concept of looking at why hate crimes, there's no hate crimes. I'm a Catholic, man. I don't hate anybody.
Well, yeah,
I find that hard to believe, Tom.
Other than Jews and blacks, perhaps.
I know a lot of Catholics. You keep on talking about, please, I love the Catholic Church. I'm not a Catholic, but stop saying you're a Catholic. Stop blaming other people. Do you hate anyone, Tom? Do you hate anyone? Do you hate Jews?
Actually, no, I don't. You know what? I'll tell you something. I asked my dad years ago, why do people dislike Jewish people?
Yeah.
Because they're high financiers and they're smart.
I see.
So let me ask you, do you blame Jews?
They own the entertainment business. And you know what?
You know what, Tom, they certainly own CDS. You can't move for them. David Maines and people like that, they're all over the place.
I couldn't get into a movie last night, David.
Tom,
sorry.
Tom, I mean, I could take this call, go on and make you look very foolish. I'm not going to do that. I don't think that's what TV should be about. Tom, just think about some of the things you've said and the fool with all due respect, you've made of yourself. Get rid of these prejudices and look a bit beyond them. You know, forget all the banalities and the nonsense you've heard. And you know what? This might sound very prosaic, but people are very similar to one another, whatever their race and religion, and there's good and bad in all. I know, I'm a born philosopher. Lines are open, 416, whoa, we're getting them tonight. 203-0302, 905-332-3131. It's the pre-10:30 crowd, I suppose. On Michael Coren Live, back in a moment. Well, welcome back to Michael Coren Live on CTS, and lines are open for you, 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. The issue tonight, hate crimes. In Ottawa, I think, Ottawa-Carleton, they have a bias crime unit, which I find extraordinary. You know, do you have a bias? We're coming to get you. I mean, I think we can go too far at times. At the same time, there is a very poignant argument to be made for saying that hate crimes are worse than others. There's also a very effective one from reasonable people who believe in freedom to say, no, there are also the crazy people who just don't like minorities and they're trying to skirt between the issues. And I think we can always tell who they are. Diane is on line 7. Hi, Diane.
Hello.
Hello.
I just didn't know where to start after listening to this evening's program. I'm a police officer, and I work in the Greater Toronto area. I know David, and my job is I do race relations training for both sworn members as well as civilian support personnel, and we also do community education. We monitor hate crime, and I work and live in the most culturally, ethnically, racially, and religiously diverse community in Canada. And the problem with hate crime is that, A, many people do not know what it is. They do not understand that their prejudices and biases and that the way they discriminate against people that they don't know or don't understand is harmful, and it's also against the law. Many people that have been a victim of a hate crime are unaware that they have been a victim of a hate crime because they have been subjected to acts of discrimination for so long that they just believe that it's a way of life and that they therefore must have to endure it. So one of your callers started to say that education is the ticket. Yes, education and tolerance and acceptance and understanding of our cultural diverse community is a blessing. It's not a burden in any way.
That's the end of your comment?
Well, I've got lots to say, but I'm not going to take up all the time.
All right, then, let me ask you, as a police officer, this one. Michael Enright is a leading personality on CBC Radio. We all pay his wages because it's tax-funded, of course. In an interview with the Globe and Mail newspaper, he said that the Roman Catholic Church was the greatest criminal organization in the world outside of the mafia. Shortly after that, he was given the most important position on CBC Radio, hosting the morning show. Do you think what he said was a hateful comment? Was it, in fact, a criminal comment?
Criminal code comment definite under 318 and 319 doesn't quite fit the definition. But however, if he had caused other people to do things or incited other people to do things, or there was more, I don't know what the full comment was, is that by all means it could be followed up, it could be investigated, and depending on what the full story was and the circumstances and the outcome, he could very well be held responsible for his comments criminally, yes.
Well, see, he wasn't. In fact, he was rewarded with a plum job. Now, I think what he said was a horrible thing to say, and he was absolutely wrong. But you know what? I also think he had the right to say it.
Yeah, but Michael, I don't, based on your comment, and I didn't see it or hear it, I don't see any incitement of hatred in his comment. So it wouldn't fall under 318 or 319 of the code.
Well, let's say a Catholic kid doesn't go to a separate school, he goes to a public school, and he's maybe the only Catholic in the school, and Johnny comes in and says, hey, that Michael Enright, he's really clever because he works for the CBC, and he says that the Roman Catholic Church is a criminal organization only just like the mafia, and you're a Catholic. Whack!
Yes, that may be the result, but is Michael Enright promoting or advocating hatred? That's the issue. And I would say, no, he's not.
This is where it gets very complex, isn't it?
Well, our law is very complex as well. I mean, Section 319, which Diane was referring to, deals specifically with knowingly and willfully promoting hatred against an identifiable group. Now, on the surface of it, what Mr. Enright said may be viewed as hateful and stupid, quite possibly.
Certainly the latter, yeah.
Yes. However, we have to take a look at the overall Michael Enright. I mean, does he go around doing this as a thing to do? Is there a history here? I mean, there's much that has to be looked into in terms of applying this particular law. This is not a law that you want to apply holus bolus. It is a law that is an infringement on our freedom of speech. And, you know, there are those of us that do argue that certain with free speech comes certain responsibilities. Yep. But I tend to agree with David that in the overall, this particular statement, as dumb as it may have been, does not fall within the ambit of Section 19.
We get into trouble because we start finding this great big gray zone where someone on high is going to tell us, well, this one doesn't quite cut it, and this one does.
We interpret laws all the time, Paul.
Well, we do, but here we have to remember that what we're talking about is hate-motivated crime. So we're saying that the thought component is what's crucial here, that this person holds a belief.
No, it's not. You're wrong. It's not the thought component. You can think whatever you want, and the criminal code doesn't care. There's no law in Canada that cares what you think. The law cares about what you do, whether it's expressing or acting.
But if the act is produced by a hateful thought, that's the issue.
Yeah, but the point is it's the act, it's not the thought.
But that's false, because after the person is convicted of the act,
right,
The sentencing stage comes in, and at that stage, if the person is found to have been motivated, to have held a certain belief or thought that led him to cause that crime,
Yes.
then his sentence is increased. That's the same as saying, because you held that thought, your sentence is worsened.
You're completely wrong. You're completely wrong on
that.
that.
The law can't prove what you think unless you do something to express what you think.
An expression of your thoughts is not.
So when you're saying you did something
Unless
because
Not every expression.
when you're saying you did something because you thought, okay, that's wrong. It's not what you thought. It's what you did. What you did in order to convey what you feel.
If a man,
and it has to be about hate. I hate this group
that's
of people.
correct. If a man stabs another man and says, I did that because I hate the group from which you're coming, let's say it's a religious group, okay? There's the evidence of what was in his mind. There's the evidence of his motive, and that will be used by the judge to increase his sentence.
What came out of his mouth.
No, that's not what the code says. It says if he was motivated to do the crime, not that he expressed his...
Paul, you have to prove the motivation, and the motivation has got nothing to do with what's in his head. It's what comes out of his mouth.
What came out of his mouth is a question of evidence about what was in his head, and the punishment follows what was in his head.
But that's, that's not unique in Canadian law. First of all, wait a second. There's two parts to it. First of all, it's the act. The motivation doesn't even come into the process. It isn't considered by the judge until there's a finding that the act, that is the hate crime, as it were, and we're not talking about hate propaganda now, we're talking about the assault, is done. And then when the issues of sentencing come up, and that's very different than simply a trial on whether he did or didn't commit a criminal act. And there are a whole bunch of factors, I guess that's not a great way of putting a whole bunch, but there are a number of factors that judges have the right to look at, including a series of motivating factors, whether they're hate or other. And what the law says, what a statute says, which is something that the law said before, but it wasn't codified in the criminal court. Right. The Ontario Court of Appeal said in a number of cases, Lelis and before that Ingram, is that the judge must consider it. But it doesn't, by the way, say that a judge must increase the sentence. You're wrong about that.
The lines are open, 416-203-0302-905-332-3131. Frida, Brian, Rick, Joe, Mike will get to you when we come back. Don't you dare go away, because I know exactly where you live, okay? Welcome back to Michael Coren Live. Let me reintroduce the panel tonight. The subject is hate crime. On my left is Paul McKeever, who's a libertarian, I think is the appropriate term, isn't it?
Fair enough.
Libertarian. And on my close left is David Mercury, who's probably not a libertarian, but a criminal lawyer and a former police officer.
Of a different sort.
Of a different sort, exactly. And Marvin Kurz is National Legal Counsel for Brith Canada. Apparently the neo-Nazis in America call it banana breath. Is that right?
Well, I've never heard. They haven't told that to me.
I think that's quite good, actually.
Don't mind being called banana. That sounds like something my kid would call me.
You can imagine they probably had a full week discussion to come up with this term.
Well, I think they had a think tank, maybe with one of your earlier callers, a Catholic who has no hate for anybody.
And Bernie Farber, Executive Director, Canadian Jewish Congress, and you, Frida, on line 8. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
I'm surprised tonight because if his hate crime is included the gender, you won't have any woman in this discussion. It's in this topic to talk about the women because in society we're not secure really. And if it's been, I surprised one of the gentlemen is mentioned if this we have a woman as a mother and a sister and aunt whatever. That's they're being asked or that's not as a hate crime should call it. But I think if he was a woman and he had the fear to go out in the middle of the night, and if he was harassed at work, if he was harassed when he's coming back at work at 12 o'clock at p.m., it wouldn't say that kind of things. That's the harassment of the woman and the gender is not a hate crime.
I'm not sure if he quite said that. By the way, I do apologise. You're right. We should have had a woman on the panel, and I apologise for that. Harassment could be something different, but certainly, for example, the Montreal Massacre. Well, that was a hate crime.
I was going to, and I think that maybe being aware of limited time on the station here, I'm not saying that women are never victims of hate crime. They most certainly are. And what happened in Montreal is an example of that. All I'm saying is that every time a woman is attacked, it's not because of a hate crime. It's not a hate. It is not, in fact, a hate crime. But certainly they can be victims of a hate crime, and often are.
But there is a discussion about whether crimes like rape or misogyny, that is writing things that are very anti-women, should be included within the hate crime section, and certainly a lot of feminists feel that should be done. But the contrary argument isn't one that attempts to diminish those crimes, but says instead they've already been dealt with, they've already been given a series of separate sections of the criminal code that already consider, if you can call it, the hateful and the damaging aspects. I think that it can be argued, though, that, for example, that the law doesn't consider, taking, for example, rape, the true effect, the soul-destroying effect of rape on women, because most of the lawmakers have never experienced and are not in danger of experiencing it. But what it is, I think that to call it apples and oranges might be right, but to say that one is worse than the other is very wrong, because there are a number of things in common. Women's rights to feel comfortable in society, to, in effect, exercise their democratic rights, which I've talked about before, which is one of the hallmarks of a hate crime, apply to crimes like rape as well. But it's already something that the criminal code is dealt with, and I think that the better way to deal with it is to deal with it in itself and decide how best to deal with that particular problem.
Well, there are, of course, some feminists who argue, and there's some force behind the argument, that particularly unpleasant pornography is hate crime, because of the objectification of women, the way they're presented in animal fashion, and leading to crimes of misogyny and attacks on women. I mean, and of course, one of the men who's indulged in that, Larry Flint, we have a movie made about his life, and he's championed by a lot of the usual suspects who say, well, it's freedom of speech, isn't it? So, I mean, let's take another line. Thank you for that, Frida. Let's go to Brian on line 2. Hi there, Brian.
Hi. I'd like to comment on two of the previous callers before I actually ask my question.
Okay.
Tom's call was very unsettling. The Catholic wouldn't a hate crime. The law hold him accountable for what he said. Regarding the officer, education is not the ticket. You can know the difference between right and wrong and still choose to do wrong, knowing full well that it is wrong. Education contributes, but it's not the solution. And now my question. What if someone were black and dragged to his death behind a truck? Could it be that the driver was a Satanist or had some other motivation than hatred towards black for committing the crime, like a senseless crime with no logical reason behind it, yet still be labeled a hate crime?
I don't think under Canadian law that would meet the definition of a hate crime. I mean, obviously, as we were discussing earlier, evidence of the person's motive would be relevant to determining in that particular crime whether or not the person's sentence should be increased. If the person has not expressed any inclination against blacks, or if there's been no other evidence to suggest that the crime was committed because of a race hatred, then I don't think it would meet the standard for raising the sentence as set out in the criminal code.
It's not enough to be for there to be a crime where a victim is a member of a vulnerable group. The Crown is required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt through either acts or words or some other form of expression by the accused or by someone talking about things that the accused has said or done, that this is hate motivated. So if it's just a crime where there's a minority victim, that's not enough.
Okay, let's take another call. Thank you for that. Let's go to Rick on line 4. Hi, Rick.
Hello?
Hello there.
Yeah, I was just wondering, why do we always focus on the end result of the hatred when we allow the people to lie, like the lie that perpetuates the hatred?
Sorry, I didn't get all of that. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I said I don't know why we always focus on the end result of the hatred, like the massacres and all that. When it's pretty obvious that it's going to happen when we tolerate the lies that perpetuate that hatred.
Well, I think that's what the code is trying to do, is to deal with like when you look at section 319, and I have it here in front of me, subsection 2, it talks about the willful promotion of hatred. And it says that everyone who by communicating statements other than in private conversation willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group. So they're talking about trying to they're not waiting for an act to occur. They're talking about the promotion of hatred.
Right. Hateful words basically lead to hateful action.
Well, that leads me into an area, with an hour show I couldn't do this. With an hour and a half, I want to get into this. If a man denies the Holocaust publicly, vociferously, is he then provoking, inspiring, motivating hatred towards Jews?
Yes, almost always he is.
It depends on one key element. And that key element is if a nutcase were to stand up and say, the Holocaust didn't happen, period. That's not necessarily promoting hatred against Jews, but adding the caveat that others in the Holocaust denial movement do, where Jews become the perpetrator of their own victimhood, if you will. Not only did the Holocaust not happen, but Jews are responsible for perpetrating this lie, etc., etc. Then you move from being stupid and saying stupid statements to saying hateful statements.
Should Holocaust denial be a hate crime?
Yes,
absolutely.
Let me just finish about this, because Holocaust denial, and I'll carry on from what Bernie was saying. Holocaust denial, by its nature, is a hate crime because it's not just some wacky view of history. It implies a whole bunch of assumptions, and here are the assumptions. One, the Jews all got together as conspirators to make up the story, because how would the Holocaust happen and we didn't know about it? So the Jews have to get together and come up with a conspiracy. Why would they come up with this conspiracy? Well, why else? It's because the old anti-Semitic canard. For the money, because Jews are extortionists. So the whole story becomes that the Jews are a fifth column, which is another anti-Semitic canard, and that they did all of this in order to extort money from Germany and the United States for reparations and for political gain that is
Let me stop you.
Israel.
I've got to break here. Lines are open for this is going to be a busy one. 416-203-0302, 905-332-3131. Wait for the caller who says, I'm not anti-Semitic, but. See you in a moment on Michael Coren Live. Welcome back, Michael Coren Live, the station is CTS, of course. We're talking about hate crimes, and we mentioned, should Holocaust denial be a hate crime? Now, let's be intelligent about this. We're all intelligent people. You don't just walk along and say, you know what, that Holocaust, I don't think it happened. I mean, that's not what this is about. People who deny the Holocaust, of course, tend to have a whole ragbag of ideas and ideals. They have an ideology. But should it be a hate crime? We're talking about a hate crime, what it is, what it isn't. Paul McKeever, you wanted to talk about the Holocaust denial issue.
Well, not particularly the Holocaust, because I think it's offensive just to even discuss it sometimes in these arguments. But if you think about allegations of truth or falsity, generally, okay, when they are made publicly, you have to think that there are certain things that are said that are demonstrably false. Now, those things, obviously, we don't need to do anything about, because they're demonstrably false. We can demonstrate that they are false. They don't pose as much of a threat to society. Society has the means to determine that there's falsity being promoted. If you look at things that aren't demonstrably false, and I'm not pointing to any particular demonstrably or not demonstrably false thing, but if you look at allegations that are not demonstrably false, then we really can't afford to censor or punish, because at that point we get into the more controversial questions of fact.
You know, Paul, you'll have to sort of give me some examples, because when Michael asked the question about Holocaust denial, to me this is a very unique and troubling, obvious example. Holocaust denial, as expressed by Holocaust deniers such as Ernst Zundel, I believe fall under Section 319 of the Criminal Code without any question, because not because he just says the Holocaust didn't happen, but because he goes that step further and promotes hatred against Jews. It's the act of promoting hatred. And maybe we're getting caught up in words, Michael. Maybe you're asking, is Holocaust denial, should that be illegal? It's not Holocaust denial per se. It's the act of promoting hatred against Jews by using Holocaust denial that falls under Section 319 of the Criminal Code.
I think there's a problem with that, though. Like, you can't say that, I mean, you can't separate promoting an emotion from
emotion. We're not talking emotion here,
hatred.
Paul.
You can't separate the promotion or the incitement of an emotion from the means. And the means are all that matter here in terms of the law. Now, the means are what we have to question. If the means are simply the allegation of truth or falsity, as opposed to...
It's never that simple. Let's be clear.
Well, let me distinguish. As opposed to, for example, saying, go out and kill Joe X. Okay? But if it's simply an allegation of truth or falsity, and this is what we were talking about, the incitement of hatred via making false statements about the Holocaust, okay, then I really don't think we can afford to censor or to punish, because...
the law censors all sorts of statements of truth or falsity, and the law allows itself... Hold on a second. If I were to call you a drug czar, a kingpin, a child prostitute leader,
right,
I would be making a statement of truth or falsity, and you, by what you're saying, I shouldn't be able to sue you for libel. You shouldn't be able to sue me, rather, for libel.
Well, and as you know as a lawyer, the whole issue of slander and libel is very contentious with respect to its effacement with freedom of speech, and it's by no means settled that in a free...
It's quite clear.
The Supreme Court of Canada
I'm not talking about
settled
as a matter
those issues in a
I'm
case
speaking
called
philosophically.
Hill versus Scientology.
Yeah,
and what they say is that the law of libel, I'll let you get in a second, the law of libel is a balancing of the rights of freedom of speech and the rights to reputation, just as the hate propaganda section is a balancing of the rights of individuals to free expression and the rights of groups to be free of that kind of attack.
Yeah, let's get some more calls, lots of them there. Joe is on line 5. Hi there, Joe.
Good evening, Michael.
Hello.
And first of all, I'm jealous of Jewish people because they know how to make the money, and the Gentiles were a little slow on it.
Joe, I only wish that were true. Don't let my wife hear you say that, okay?
I'm jealous of Galen Weston.
Joe, let me ask you, look, I tell you, I'm half really wealthy. I'm half... My dad's Jewish. He's a taxi driver. He works a 70-hour week, and we never saw anything. Where do you get this idea that all Jews are rich?
No, they work for their money. That's more than some of the Canadians.
Some do. Some are very lazy. I mean, any generalization, whether it's positive or negative, honestly, John, I'm sure you only mean well, but I think it's damaging. Yeah. You know, see Jews in Israel, see Jews in Russia, see poverty, see nice Jews, see nasty Jews, clever ones, stupid ones. Believe me, I know some stupid ones. I can give you their names and addresses. It's to generalize either positively or negatively, even if you mean well, I think ultimately is damaging.
Yeah. Well, about the hatred, you know, people hating people, I find that in traveling streetcars in the city of Toronto, you see some of the parents say to the kids, "Oh, just shove your way through. They're Chinese. What the hell? They shouldn't even be here. Blacks or whatever it is." It starts at home. Some of this hatred with people. I used to go with a girl in Detroit, and I took her son out for lunch one day, and 2 black kids were coming down the street, and I said, "Oh, move over, let them by." 2 or 3 kids. He says, "They can move for me. They're black." I mean, they're taught. He was taught that, this kid. And I thought it was a damn shame.
Oh, Joe, you're absolutely right. Without any doubt, it is taught. If you see kids playing, you will know that racism is not something which is innate or integral. It is learned. However it comes about, though, we have to deal with it.
I think this goes back to it, though. I mean, this is the second caller now who has mentioned that, or made an allegation that all Jews are making a lot of money or something along those lines. And earlier in the conversation, we were saying, you know, crimes motivated by avarice and greed have to be distinguished from those motivated by hate. I don't think we can afford to make those distinctions. I mean, obviously, in this sort of situation where people are making allegations about Jews being wealthy, that's in large part the source of their hate.
But Joe doesn't hate. I mean,
I'm not saying that Joe does. I'm not saying that Joe does, and I'm sorry, Joe, if I'm making that allegation to you, but I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, in an earlier call as well, we heard the allegation that Jews are making a lot of money. And there was this kind of dislike for that.
You see the difference between someone who makes a statement that's clearly wrong and someone who's promoting hatred. Neither of those callers are promoting hatred. They're not even in the ballpark.
No, I'm not trying to relate this to those callers.
I don't see the nexus then. I don't see why you're making the point.
The nexus is we can't afford in a democracy to say that it's this kind of hatred is not going to be acceptable. The kind that's about race and nationality, etc. But the kind about hating someone because they're wealthy, or because they went to a certain school.
But if somebody's an anti-Semite and their story is, and I mean, we've got to put it this way, that their story or their excuse is that Jews are rich, it's not because of their wealth, it's because it's their hatred of their Judaism. That's the whole
perhaps it's about their envy for their position.
I haven't heard somebody call to complain about rich non-Jews. And there are many, many more of them.
What about if an anarchist organization says, eat the rich, kill the rich? Is that a hate crime? Is that statement, could that be construed as being hateful?
Well, something like that doesn't focus on any particular group. I mean, who is rich and who should you eat?
I clearly disagree. I mean, clearly there are people who drive cars and demonstrate their wealth, or they live in large houses and are easily identifiable. Why are those people not part of a group? I mean, what we're doing here is we're saying that there are certain groups that deserve special protection in terms of I don't mean groups, but certain characteristics that deserve special protection in terms of sentencing and other characteristics that don't. And I really think that's too subjective.
You got to look at the purpose of it. The rich people, if I can call them that, if we can call that group whatever that means, are less vulnerable. I have yet to hear a pogrom against rich people.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to stop you there and get, but if vulnerability is the issue, then I think we're getting beyond what the law says and should say. Anyway, 416-2030-302-905-332-3131. Michael Coren Live, back in a moment. Welcome back to Michael Coren Live. The subject tonight is hate crime. Let me reintroduce my stellar panel. On my left, Paul McKeever, lawyer and member of the Ontario Freedom Party. David Mercury is a former police officer and a criminal lawyer. Marvin Kurz, National Legal Counsel, Brith Canada, and Bernie Farber, Executive Canadian Jewish Congress. Marvin, you mentioned vulnerability as being an issue when it comes to hate crimes. So you're saying if people are well protected, even if they're a minority, then it's not an issue?
What I said when I'm talking about vulnerability is that the criminal law and our law is purposive. It evolves for a purpose and it decides that there are certain interests that need to be protected because they're vulnerable. And what we were saying just when we were off camera is, for example, the law has evolved in a way that you can't come into an airport and start making jokes about having a bomb, even though that's a form of expression, even if it's a stupid joke, because airlines and people who fly in airplanes are vulnerable, and there have been attacks. So they have to protect them. The reason that the law has evolved to protect against certain sophisticated frauds is because of the vulnerability of people to fraud. The law of rape and sexual assault has evolved because of the vulnerability of potential victims to that kind of crime. That's why the criminal code is there, because it's to protect vulnerable people against certain kinds of crimes.
Let's get back to these calls. Sarah is on line 8. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello.
I wanted to comment on what you've been saying about hate crime.
Right.
I've been a victim of hate crime. I wear a headscarf. I'm a Muslim. And one day I was walking down the street in Ottawa in the middle of the day, 5 minutes from the Parliament buildings, when a man came from out of nowhere, grabbed me by the shoulders, tried to push me back on a flower planter, screaming and yelling all kinds of obscene things. And I was just stunned. I mean, it was the middle of the day. You expect that sort of thing perhaps at night. It was obvious that he was objecting to the fact that I was wearing a scarf. And, well, I tried to hit him, and I didn't hit him hard enough. That made him angrier. So I screamed, and fortunately someone intervened. And, I mean, I didn't suffer any bodily harm or anything, but it's the emotional impact, I find, that is really the hardest to deal with. That you feel that this could happen to you for no reason except that you're wearing this thing that is obviously bothering to some people. And it really does, as David pointed out, interfere with the way that you live your life. You don't feel safe. You don't feel that you can just go and sit down on a park bench or go for a walk at any time. You have to be more careful than the average person would be. You have to be more aware of what's around you, who's around you, how people are reacting to you. And you're also concerned about what's going to happen to your children.
Did you go to the police after this happened?
No, I didn't, actually. I was just very embarrassed. I wasn't expecting it, and I just felt, you know, this is really... I felt the whole thing was really embarrassing, and I felt that, you know, I felt guilty that I had somehow caused it. And, I mean, I know it sounds silly.
No.
But I felt, you know, that somehow I had caused it.
It shows how you're doubly victimized. You're victimized by what the guy did, and then you felt afterwards it's your fault. I mean, obviously it's not your fault, but the guy did that to you, and that crime attacked you, not personally, but really to the core of what you are.
If I could say, Sarah, to me, what you have told us this evening is the most eloquent example of why there are anti-hate laws in this country. You know, we've been sitting here for an hour and a quarter discussing it, debating it, arguing it, and yet your very poignant and tragic example, I think, clearly made the point as to why we believe there should be anti-hate laws in this country. I'm sorry you didn't go to the police. I understand why you didn't, and I think many victims of such crimes choose not to report it for the very reasons that you said. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for saying
it. Yes, it is eloquent, it is moving, but hold on just one little minute. You can go to any video store, even to most theaters, and see a movie that portrays Muslims, Arabs as being animalistic, salivating morons who are either raping women or planting bombs in airports or screaming at one another. Why did that man do that? Probably because he'd seen some of the products that come out of Hollywood and elsewhere, where people, particularly, you know, at this time, the two groups you go for, Christians and Muslims, the two groups who seem to be fair game, and you caricature and you marginalize. So who are the criminals in all of this?
Michael, I'm not going to sit here and defend what Hollywood has done to Muslims, to Christians, to Jews, to blacks. I mean, everybody has been unfortunate and fair game to them. The focus here is how the episode that happened to Sarah has affected her life in particular. There's no question that the media plays a role in how shall I say this, moving people along to certain ways of thinking. And I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of dealing with the media, radio, television, the movies, unquestionably. But people still have to take responsibility for their own actions.
But isn't the issue here, I mean, the law already makes that person take responsibility for his own action by punishing him for the very act that he committed. What we're talking about here is not whether or not that person should be punished. And frankly, I think if a person is particularly vulnerable, the solution might be better sentencing across the board for assaults or better protection in certain areas.
Well,
but let me finish. What we're really talking about here in this discussion is whether we ought to not just punish the assault, but punish the motive for the assault.
Correct. And Paul, punish the difference
the belief. Let me just finish though. Punish the belief, the belief system, or the thought that the person had.
It's still the action, Paul. And the difference is the only reason that Sarah was attacked was because she was wearing a Muslim scarf. Period. If she wasn't wearing that scarf, she could have been walking down Wellington Street in Ottawa and nothing would have happened to her, period.
And if that fellow had been convicted, and I'm sorry that he wasn't, but if that fellow had been convicted and had not done it out of hate, maybe he'd done it because he was a few screws short, you know, if he had done it for that reason, he would have received a sentence this large. And if the judge had found that there was evidence that the reason he did it was because he hated people of, I forget what Sarah's, how she identified herself, but of her particular group, then the judge would have the discretion and would be encouraged by the code to encourage. And I think wrongly so, because at that point, what the judge is punishing is the person's thoughts and beliefs, which are protected by the charter.
One moment, if I could, as the voice of reason here.
My God,
We've really fallen, haven't we? If sentencing is meant to dissuade people from repeating the crime, if someone is insane, you cannot stop someone from committing a crime. Insanity will produce crime. If there are people out there who may be tempted to beat up a Muslim woman because she's a soft target, she's a woman, this might say to them, don't do it. And if we can save people from further crime, aren't we achieving something?
Why not just say don't do it to anybody?
But we do say don't do it to anybody. We don't stop saying don't do it to anybody, including beating people up in the bar or robbing people or what have you. But the Canadian law of sentencing deals with a variety of factors. Once there's a finding that a crime has been committed, the judge is entitled to look at a whole host of motivating factors, including whether the person's done it in the past, whether they've expressed an animus to the person individually, and what the criminal code says in terms of this is one other factor only that has to be considered. It doesn't have to increase the sentence. It only has to be considered. But I think that the other thing that you're missing is the effect. It's not just what's in the guy's head, but it's also the effect on her. Because, as David, you were saying, sometimes it's the people who are the victims who know that they're the first person, sometimes the only people who know that they're the victim of a hate crime. And the effect that Sarah described was the effect of a hate crime, because she knew that she was the subject of a hate crime, and that's part of her feeling of guilt.
Got to go to a break here. Got to go to a break. Mike, Khan, Kim, Andy, Ray, the rest of you, we'll get to you. I promise when we come back on Michael Coren Live, 416-203-0302-905, 332-3131. See you in a moment. Welcome back to you. Lines are still very busy. Let's go to them. Hate crimes, the issue. Mike is on line 6. Hi there, Mike.
Hi there.
Hello.
You brought up the fact that, oh, geez. I've lost my train of thought. I'm sorry about that.
Don't worry, take your time.
I've been waiting. That it's institutionalized. Somebody brought up Ernst Zundel a little while ago, that idiot. This hatred of speech. No wonder minorities want to prosecute people under a moniker of hate crime, because they've suffered this kind of thing in this country for so long. They want to name it. They want to say, there's the animal. It's hatred because I'm a Jew, or it's hatred because I'm black, and that's perfectly understandable. You mentioned Hollywood a few minutes ago. On your sister station, you have Howard Stern every morning with unbelievably racist comments. This morning.
And you know what, Mike, I don't want to get into it, but this is talking about my radio career, not my... But, Mike, I mean, give me some credit. I've spoken out against Howard Stern. I'm not going to turn down a job because on a sister station there is someone I object to. There are people on most stations I object to. I'm that sort of person. But I agree with you. I think it's nothing but destructive.
No, I think it's good that you're on the air pointing your Christian point of view. I think that's great. But the thing is, it's all around us, and it's perfectly understandable why people want to call it hate crime. I don't see why... anybody has a problem with that, because that's exactly what these people are talking about. It's hate.
Well, you know what's interesting, Mike? I mean, it's a good point, because you mentioned Howard Stern. Howard Stern's Jewish. He has a black woman on with him. And you know he gets away with murder because of that? Because he can always say, yeah, but I'm Jewish and she's black, and we don't mind.
Well, he always calls himself a half-Jew. In fact, he's not Jewish at all because he was not born of a Jewish mother. His father was Jewish.
Hey, tell me about it, Bernie. But he does get away with this stuff. And I think it's terribly unfair, because I think he produces a climate where people think it's okay to use these phrases, okay to use these names. I'm not saying they're going to go out and become Nazis. I don't think his audience are those sort of people. But it's okay to tell that joke. I think it is, and there are many more like it.
He does create a permissiveness that is troubling. There's no question about that, yeah.
You know, I don't think there's any problem with calling a crime a hate crime. That's not the issue. And obviously, and who's denying that they occur? I'm not denying that they occur. I'm not denying that crimes are motivated by hate often, and that they're directed disproportionately against the very people who are meant to be addressed, or the very problems that are meant to be addressed by this law. That's not the issue. The issue is the criminalization of thought. Now, I know we're disagreeing about whether or not we're criminalizing thought, but in my mind, whenever you take a crime that would usually be punished with 4 years and slap on 3 years in addition, simply because the person was motivated by a certain belief or thought, you are punishing thought. And that, by definition, is not just hate crime, it's thought crime. Which brings us into the 1984 scenario.
That's nonsense. I just can't say anything other than that.
Comment there.
No, it's just a thoughtless comment. It doesn't make any sense, because your thoughts can be part of any number of crimes or any number of things that are illegal. And we spent almost an hour and a half going through any number of things in which your thought, what you're thinking of when you perpetrate the crime, is relevant to the crime. For example, if I assault you once, that's one thing. But if I've been stalking you for years, that's relevant because I had some thought in my mind against you. Now, if you're attacking instead of me, but let me finish this. Let me finish this. Well, of course, intent. That's what the whole sentencing enhancement section is about. But let me just take it a step further. If instead of me attacking you personally and my thought, my motivation, I'm attacking you as a member of your group, then what you got to do is you got to look back to all of the other assaults on members of that group.
But I think, if you look at the example, I mean, Colvin in his, you know, there's an introductory criminal law text, Colvin, and he discusses this. You're just, you know, he says, A poisons the T of B so that...
Like, this is getting way too legal.
So that he can...
Check your mug before we...
But the point is that he was motivated by getting the inheritance. And the motive was not the intent. The intent was he intended to put the poison in the mug.
You know, Paul, speak to
hold on,
Sarah
surely you talk about being punished for your thoughts. Surely what we're talking about here is if I really want to punch you in the head, I really think I want to do that, but don't do it, I'm allowed to think it until the cows come home. But if I think it and do it, then my thought is by its nature connected to my act. Isn't that what these guys are saying here?
That's what they're saying.
Okay. Well,
thank you.
Let's go to... let's go to...
Michael, I'm taking you to court with me tomorrow.
Don't carry your bag.
What Mr. Kurz meant to say was...
Let's go to Khan on line 3. Hi there, Khan.
Hi, how are you doing?
Well, thank you.
I would like to make a comment on a gentleman who called earlier saying that he's not a racist person because he's Catholic. I don't agree with this person because if you go back and look at history, you will find that some 500 years ago, the Arabs were in Spain, and the Jews over there were flourishing. And when the Spanish took back from the Arabs, they not only forced the Arabs out, but also forced the Jews out of Spain.
No, I think you're confusing people who do things while calling themselves Catholic and people who are Catholic. People who call themselves Jew, Protestant, Muslim, Catholic have done the most appalling things. If you really were Jewish, Christian, Muslim, your faith would stop you from committing crimes like that. His call was wrong. I know what you're saying. Terrible things have been done in the name of religion and by people who call themselves religious. But don't confuse the religion with people who claim to be part of it. I think that's the problem. Thanks for that, Con. Let's go to Kim on line 1. Hi there, Kim.
Hi, good evening, Michael.
Hello.
And everyone. I just want to say I think that all hate crimes are wrong, whether they're targeted at Jewish people, black people, Christian people, police officers, Muslim people. I think that they're all wrong that way for the sole purpose that it's rooted in hatred against someone's identity.
Kim, let me stop you there. Against police officers, Christians, that's not the issue here. You say, I mean, are they even included in the law?
Christians would certainly be included. Police officers would not. A police officer, I mean, I can understand what she's saying, but a police officer can take his uniform off and walk home. David can't change the color of his skin. And that, in essence, is the difference.
It's interesting when it comes to Christians. I think we should have more time. Well, not 1.5 hours is enough. But we should have brought it up earlier because it seems to me some of the things that are said about Christians in media, in newspapers, often by mainstream people. I remember when Preston Manning, who apparently is a Christian, when he was running for office, some of the comments by mainstream journalists saying, if this man gets to office, he'll become a dictator because he's a Christian. And the law didn't come into practice. Maybe that was the fault of Christians who should have...
hatred?
I would argue they were. I would argue they were.
But you see, the criminal
code... You know
code...
what? Which is not hateful, but be quiet. when we come back, we're going to shake hands and all that sort of thing and resolve our differences and see who was right and who was wrong. Maybe on Michael Coren Live. Stay with us for a couple of moments. That is it. We're out of time. Our first 90-minute show. I thought that was pretty impressive. I really did. And thank you very much, Paul McKeever.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you, David Mercury. And thank you, Marvin Kurz. And thank you, Bernie Farber. Tomorrow night we have our political panel where we have representatives of Tory, NDP and Liberal. And wait for that one. Take care. God bless. Goodbye. See you tomorrow. See you. Thank you, my friend.